Welcome to the next generation in chelated minerals. Introducing new Keysure Plus amino acid chelated minerals from Balchem. Keysure Plus delivers a higher concentration of mineral with a superior amino acid profile. The higher mineral content adds formulation flexibility, opening up space in the ration, and also reduces the carbon footprint. The superior amino acid profile delivers 28% protein from microbial biomass. The Keysure Plus line also offers a granulated form for improved handling characteristics and reduced dust. Visit balchem.com to see how new Keysure Plus can deliver the added benefits you need to improve performance and reduce manufacturing hurdles.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Real Science Lecture Series. My name is Clay Zimmerman, Director of Science and U.S. Ruminant Technical Services for Balchem. Today, we welcome Andrew Rose from BioESAC to discuss a critical and timely question: could your dairy operation survive an attack? The dairy industry has entered a new risk era. Today's operations are digitally connected and deeply tied into global supply chains, which makes them efficient and also attractive targets. Cyber criminals, hacktivists, animal extremist groups, and nation-state actors are actively executing attacks, and most dairy operations are underprepared. This session will provide a roadmap for how the dairy industry can detect threats early, harden operations, and respond decisively under pressure. But before we get started, let's go through a few housekeeping items. On the screen is an example of what you should see as your webinar interface. In the upper right-hand corner, you should see some options that look like this. Here you can access the Q&A tab. Please use this to submit questions during the webinar. All the questions will be collected during the session, and we will address them at the end. We may not get to all of them, but we will do our best. A copy of today's slides and the certificate to receive your ARPAS credits are available to download from the Handouts tab. If you have any trouble during today's session, please type it into the Q&A tab, and one of our session organizers will work with you to resolve the issue. As always, a copy of the handouts and the video of today's presentation will be available at balchem.com/realscience within 48 hours. I would now like to introduce Andrew Rose. Andrew Rose is an advisor at the BioESAC, helping bring cybersecurity and related threat awareness, mitigation, and response to the bioeconomy, with a focus on the agriculture and food sector. He has served as Chief Strategic Officer in Residence at the Emerging Technology Center, Chair of the Advisory Council for the Maryland Cybersecurity Association, and as a judge for the Grow New York Ag Innovation Competition. He helped found the GIVE program and began a cybersecurity awareness program in 2016 while at a major agricultural bank, after recognizing that the ag sector wasn't getting the attention it needed regarding risks from cyber criminals and other adversaries. He also has deep experience in cybersecurity, banking, finance, risk management, and other professional service sectors related to food and agriculture. Andrew, welcome to the Real Science Lecture Series. The floor is now yours.
Well, thank you, Clay. That's quite an introduction there as well. And as a side note, the Grow New York applications have just opened up. So if there's any entrepreneurs out there that have something that will benefit agriculture somewhere in New York State, they would love to hear from you. Top prize is $1 million. Second prize, $250,000, and third prize, $250,000. So it's something to keep on your radar screen. And New York is also very dairy friendly, as I think most of our listeners here know. Thank you, Clay, and thank you, Balchem, for letting me come and talk today. The dairy industry is one of many sectors that I'm keenly watching for adversarial malfeasance in the sector. And to kind of give your listeners and the audience here a little background on me, I'm not a cybersecurity expert. That was not my training. I'm more of an accidental expert. When I was at a large agricultural bank, I had a team that was geographically dispersed, and I figured the best way to build camaraderie was to run a tabletop exercise, a business continuity exercise, and I picked ransomware as the inject that we needed to deal with and uncover any blind spots or gaps. And what I saw was that even though in many sectors we were ready, there were other sectors that we had missed. And I became curious about agriculture at large, whether this bottom of the Maslow's hierarchy is as protected as it needs to be. And unfortunately, what I found over the past 10 years is that we're still in the awareness stage of things, going across all the sectors and letting folks know who's out there and what they intend to do with us. I speak nationally quite a bit, as well as giving private briefings to different sectors. And my focus now is future threat modeling. It's understanding what the next attack could be, who the adversary could be, and then what weapons they will use, and then what are the secondary knock-along effects should something like that happen. I do quite a few regional exercises like this, bringing in state emergency management, law enforcement, intelligence, and industry, where we sit around a table and say, hey, we're seeing something over here, and usually we see something over here, it comes here next. Let's prepare for it and run a tabletop and find all those things that we can then address. Everything I'm going to share today is public information. It's all open source. This presentation has been reviewed by folks in the industry, by law enforcement, intelligence community, and others for their input, because this could be an 8-hour presentation that's squeezed into about an hour here. I want to make sure that I'm giving the best information, the most impactful information that we possibly can. And I do want to prepare the listeners out there that this is a very dark subject matter. We're going to be pulling the curtain back on a few things, but there is hope as well. So at the end of this deck, it's not all dystopia. There will be some shining lights that you can point to, or things you can go do today to make yourself a little bit more safe. The BioISAC, that's the Bioeconomy Information Sharing and Analysis Center. We are a small nonprofit, and we sit between government and the entire life sciences community. And originally, the bioeconomy was just agriculture, forest, and marine, but it has been expanded to include life science. So our partners are institutions like MIT, Johns Hopkins, Pacific Northwest Labs, others, Google, others like that, who have a great deal of interest in the biopharma space. The agriculture sector is wonderful as I think it is, as encompassing as I think it is just a small part of the BioISAC. And what the BioISAC does generally is just share information. If we see something happening somewhere, we share information amongst our members in the community so they can be prepared if it comes. Something happens, we can do a threat analysis, and we can also response or look at triaging any kind of attack and understand who is the best person to reach out to at what given time. So that's a little, Clay, that's a little about me and how I came to be at this place here. Any questions about that part?
I think we're good. Thank you.
All right. Well, I think the one of the things that we need to discuss here is what are we talking about in terms of who is attacking dairy and why these things are able to happen. We exist in a world of gray zone warfare. From the West, from the United States in particular, we view warfare as kinetics, as missiles, as boots on the ground, as bullets and bombs, those things that explode. Our adversaries, however, view the domain of warfare across everything. That includes education, that includes finance, includes legal. All those are domains of warfare that we unfortunately, as an open and transparent society, haven't really girded ourselves against. And when our adversaries move in this gray zone, that gives them a lot of plausible deniability. So much of what we're going to talk about today falls under gray zone warfare. There is a little debate, there was under Biden, and there's more debate under Trump. Should there be a kinetic response to an attack in the gray zone? You know, that's for the government philosophers and policymakers to debate. But it would be interesting to get some sort of clear guidance on this. One of the interesting techniques that we'll brush upon in this presentation is something called the cabbage tactic. And for those of you who watch geopolitics, China has been exerting a lot of strength in the South Pacific and China Seas. The Philippines is one of the places they really have targeted. And the way they target it is like a cabbage. They wrap it up. So the first layer is fishing boats and civilian vessels of a variety of sorts. Beyond that would be the Coast Guard. And then beyond that would be the Navy. So any interaction that the Philippines has with any one of those layers creates a risk to the Philippines. It could be a geopolitical risk. It could be a legal risk. It could be a lot of different things. And over time, that normalizes that behavior. The bar has then been raised higher for China in terms of acquisition or control of the Philippines. They're doing a similar tactic with Taiwan. And there's an interesting article in the New York Times, I can't remember how long ago it was, maybe 10 years ago, called The Shark and the Minnow. So if any of your listeners out there would like to get more information about the cabbage tactic, that's a great place to start looking at it. Another thing too, just in gray zone, so it's not just the cybersecurity attacks that we're going to discuss today. It's also misinformation, disinformation. With AI right now, it's very difficult to trust anything you see in a digital format. Corporate espionage is white hot right now. A lot of our adversaries will use proxy groups to carry out their attacks. So you think about Iran using the Houthis back in the day to lob missiles at boats going through the straits. That was using a proxy group. Sabotage, lawfare, using our legal system against us for foreign interests. Unfortunately, assassinations are also part of the gray zone. But keep in mind, even though our adversaries freely use this and view this as a domain of warfare, we still do not. And I think we do need to have a serious question about what that looks like in terms of a national response. Clay, what questions do you have about that?
We don't have any coming in quite yet, so
that sounds good.
Yeah.
All right. Well, let's get to the fun one here. So, Clay, when we were going through our pre-show here, you said, "Well, I don't know some of these groups." Well, overall, and this is part of the gray zone. If you look at the web of who finances these groups, and sometimes it's not direct financing, sometimes it's indirect financing using a proxy to get resources to certain activist groups. Direct Action Everywhere is one of the most active groups at this point in time. And the goal of all these groups is to remove animal protein from everyone's plate. I mean, regardless of the animal welfare and other issues they raise, the end goal is to remove animal protein from our plates. PETA has been hosting, or maybe it was DXE, was hosting the Right to Rescue workshops, teaching people how to infiltrate animal production facilities and rescue these animals. PETA has been training people for several years now how to be a PETA spy, how to take advantage of the shortage of labor to get hired and then be able to infiltrate into these facilities, place cameras, create different types of chaos or what have you that looks good on film, or just basically sit there until needed. A fun fact is I do a lot of work across all the agriculture sectors. One of the sectors that's getting a lot of focus from the animal activists right now is insect production. I know a lot of folks out there scoff at the bug folks, but even they are in the crosshairs. If you look at the upper right-hand corner here, you'll see a woman rescuing some chickens right now. That's Zoe Rosenberg. Recently, she lost a court case. We were all kind of on pins and needles whether or not she would succeed. But she and her compatriot, Raven Deerbrook, have targeted Purdue farms, especially out in California, the Petaluma poultry. And so she went in the farm there, and you can see she's certainly biosecure with her hairnet. I really have no idea why she would do that. It's not to hide her identity because she obviously wanted to film herself doing this. But anyway, she rescued 4 chickens. She calls them Azalea, Ivy, Poppy, and Aster. But the reason why she was convicted wasn't just rescuing these birds. She and Raven cut through chains and locks. They put vehicle trackers on cars. And then prior to that, they had gone into Zoe had gone into a Safeway and poured a vial of fake blood on the floor and screamed and shouted. And then they went into the water fountain at UC Berkeley and filled it with red water and held up some signs and what have you. But really the coup de grace was she was upset that the owner of the Minnesota Timberwolves, or one of the owners, Glenn Taylor, also had interest in a layer facility in Iowa. So during a 2022 NBA playoff game, she chained herself to the basketball hoop in protest. So she's quite vocal. It wasn't about rescuing chickens, it's about making a point for the media. And one thing to keep in mind about animal activists, and we'll get to this in a little bit, is they're, in addition to getting protein off plates, they're looking to influence policy. So looking to get in the media, to get attention and things like that. There have been some biosecurity incidences where folks that are exercising their right to rescue tendencies in California have very likely transmitted highly pathogenic avian influenza from one farm to another based on the genomics of that strain. I have not seen that in print, so it's only been rumored. You guys can go out there and fact check that if you'd like.
So Andrew, all three of those groups they're all animal activist groups.
Well, yeah, and I'm going to go back to Counterglow. I missed that one too. So Counterglow, it's Project Counterglow. I encourage everyone listening who is an agriculture producer, processor, to go there and see if your facility is listed on there. This is a crowdsourced website of every animal production and processing facility in the United States, and it is constantly updated. There have been rumors of blacked out drones flying around, looking at entrances, tracking vehicle movements, things like that. And the database is staggering what they've put together there. So if you think about people who are lone wolves or activists and are looking for some place to go, this is a resource for them to go and start plotting and planning their activities. So I would encourage everyone to be aware. And I apologize, I don't have proof of this, but I have heard of farms, producers being able to remove themselves from that. I'm not quite sure what that process would look like, but if you're not aware of that, that certainly needs to be on your radar screen. Clay, was there something else there as well?
No.
Well, too bad, because I was going to take a sip of water while you said yes, but anyway.
All right. No, I do have a question on that one. So, and
Okay.
one that came up here.
Sure.
Are certain regions more active or visible in animal rights organizing? And if so, what factors would explain that?
Probably the coast, but I might be overgeneralizing. Only because I'm based in the Delmarva area and affiliated a lot with the broilers, and that's always been squarely in the target, both of animal activists and environmentalists. And a lot of the action that we see is in California, although Utah was a focus and Indiana's been a focus. And in Mississippi, another anomaly, they were protesting a catfish processing facility. So I would, again, not to overgeneralize, I would say it tends to cluster on the coast, but so do populations. And you got the proximity of facilities that are near large clusters of people. So that could account for it as well. And if you think about it, if you're out in one of the I states, especially down in the fields area, everyone knows everyone's car. Sometimes they know everyone's plane that flies overhead. So it'd be kind of hard to be inconspicuous at that point. So this is kind of the meat and potatoes of what we're going to discuss. I'm not going to have to tell everyone what ransomware is, but we're going to talk a little bit about who and why is attacking the agriculture supply chain. If it's a financial attack, it's most likely going to be Russia or North Korea. That seems to be their mode of operation. If it's an Iranian attack, it's probably going to be, or at least this is prior to the events that have just occurred recently. But prior to that, if it's an Iranian attack, it was most likely going to be on a company that was somehow affiliated with Israel. And a lot of times they would focus on defacement of websites. They didn't really do a lot of damage relative to Russia, North Korea, but they were very focused there. There was an interesting trend that we saw develop with Iran utilizing a cyber attack prior to a kinetic attack. So blacking something out and then having kinetics. And then we saw the U.S. do that in Venezuela, and we just saw the U.S. do that to Iran. So I thought that was an interesting little evolution of how we're seeing cyber and kinetics blended together. And the real big one that we need to discuss is China. China has a lot of different reasons for what they do, mostly to gather information, hoovering up every bit of data point they possibly can find, regardless if it's useful today or not. It does go into that giant database that then could be sorted and searched appropriately. China loves, if you go back to gray zone warfare, how to defeat the enemy without fighting, they love to demonstrate capabilities. On 60 Minutes last year, there was an episode about an attack on a municipal water supply in Littleton, Massachusetts. And they interviewed the manager of the water supply. And he said, I can't figure out why China would want to attack us. We're only 10,000 people. It makes no sense. I haven't correlated it, but I suspect there must have been some sort of diplomatic negotiations going on at a geopolitical level. And China wanted to demonstrate capabilities. You may have heard vaguely of something called Volt Typhoon, VOLT. What that is China pre-positioning in our entire critical infrastructure with their fingers over the off buttons, and we're struggling to get ahead of that. Salt Typhoon, which is the other typhoon, that was China's ability to embed themselves in pretty much every communication device we had for several years, intercept most emails, communications, and what have you. And again, whether that's useful or not, they're going to keep that to themselves. China is governed by a series of 5-year plans. The 13th and 14th 5-year plans, at least from my interpretation, it reads focused on acquiring genetics and agriculture technology, those things that they're going to need to sustain their population for food security purposes. The 15th 5-year plan should be released almost any day. So I can't wait to get a full read on it. But some of the pre-reads have shown that China is going to pivot a little bit. They're still going to work on acquisition, but more on the refinement. So now that they've gotten something, they're not going to wait for us to improve upon it. They're going to take their own means and abilities and improve upon those things they've already acquired in their specific ways. One last thing to worry about with cybercrime are the insider threats. We mentioned before about PETA's training people to be spies. That's one area, but there's also employees, folks that work for you or work for your adjacent businesses that might be tempted in a variety of ways, whether knowingly or unwittingly, to conduct some sort of operation against your enterprise. We see that with people who are disgruntled and just want to settle a score, and they know the most vulnerable place to hit you and when to hit you, and they do it that way. Someone may have been hired away by a competitor, and the new employee wants to look good in the boss's eyes, and they want to bring something with them. We'll talk a little bit later about some of the social engineered attacks that are going on and how they're focusing on that sort of low level and mid-level employee to gain some sort of credential access into the operation. Mitigating against this, we've done a lot of research, and really it comes down just to treating employees well. The nicer you are to your employees, the less likely the insider threat can happen, or if something does become awry, it's easier for employees to report that. One fun fact about the folks that do execute these attacks, sometimes we can figure out who is doing the attack by the times of day they work and when their holidays are. There was a recent attack by a Chinese group, and we knew it because of what time they started working, what time they got off the clock, and when their holidays were. It was pretty simple. Sometimes it's not as easy to do that. Clay, any questions at all that have come up during that piece of the presentation?
So What is a kinetic attack?
Okay. Kinetics are like bombs, explosions, something that hits with force. A punch can be kinetic. The non-kinetics are more the, behind the scenes where you go almost up that line, but don't cross it.
Thanks.
Is that the only one?
That is it so far. Yeah.
Wow. Well, hopefully they're spellbound and not sleeping, but
There are, we will have a number of questions for the end. Yeah.
good to know. And obviously dairy is not immune to this. And I do want to answer one question before it's asked, and that's why dairy. When I started looking at dairy, and this was going back to, well, it was right around the time H5 got into dairy. I really started thinking, okay, why dairy? What's going on here? And then I began to kind of look at it from a global point of view. And if you're in other parts of the world, even the basis of Christianity, the promised land is milk and honey. I mean, that's where you go, and that's what you get. But in India and the Middle East, the ability to drink milk is what kept these populations alive and thriving, with all the vitamins, the protein, the fat, being a liquid in certain arid areas. Even the ancient Greeks, Hera, the bride of Zeus, made the Milky Way. This goes back very, very far. And I think that if our adversaries are looking at agriculture as critical infrastructure, which I know they are, and they want to pick sectors that would hurt us the most, from their perspective, I can see dairy being very top of that list. So, I don't, this is my thesis. It has not been proven. So that's just what I'm thinking. Because the amount of attacks that I was seeing, amount of attempted attacks that we are seeing in dairy was a little bit greater than some other sectors. So a few years back, the area I was most concerned with was the grain supply system. So we ran an exercise up in Fargo, and we envisioned what would happen if the digital underpinnings of the grain supply system went away. Could we still operate, and what would the secondary knock-along effects be? It was, for me at that point in time, it was pretty terrifying. If the digital underpinnings went away, do we still have paper tickets, and do we still have people that know how to use a paper ticket? It'd be like a Colonial Pipeline attack. When the Colonial Pipeline attack happened, they didn't knock out the valves and the flows. They just took out the billing system. They couldn't account for the oil moving through the system. The same thing would happen if the digital underpinnings of the grain supply system went away. And we looked at it as a catastrophic event. And I told a friend of mine this. He's in charge of a very large municipal water supply system. I said, that really scared us. And he goes, really? He goes, yeah, but would the system still work? Could your trucks drive on a scale? Could you move grain? And I was like, yeah, you know what? Honestly, we could. The system would still work. And he goes, that's the critical piece. And what they did late last year was run an exercise at this municipal water supply. What happens if our computers go away? What happens if we don't have the internet anymore? Can we still move water? Can we still move waste? And those things that there's an analog backup, do we know how to use them? Those things where there is no analog backup, how quickly can we get that in place right now? And that's the type of thinking that I think all the producers out there, processors, really anyone in life, what are those things that you rely upon that are internet tied, that without these, you would not be able to function? I gave a talk 2 weeks ago in Las Vegas to the Indoor Agriculture Convention. This is all the greenhouse growers and all that. And they are becoming very, very digitized right now. So that was a sobering wake-up question for them too. But that's one of those things that I think is critical for producers to be thinking about. Another thing too is, who is liable? Let's say that you do have a robotic milking machine. Let's say that the manufacturer, the vendor, the sales team, whoever it is, gets hacked, and somebody gets in there and it takes you down. Who is liable? Is it you? Is it your insurance company's going to pay that bill? Is it them? I mean, how are you even going to know where that is? And I've created a list of questions, and Clay, I can share that later on. That I think every producer and processor should be asking other vendors. Very basic things like, if this plugs into the internet, does it have a password? And if so, can I change that password? And who gets to access this? How long is the data kept? Things like that. And the suppliers should be able to answer these questions. And if not, then they should strive to find solutions to those, because I think it should become common that we begin to question anything that connects to our internet, because that opens up more windows and doors for malcontents to get into. And I would suggest for those out there that do monthly management meetings or monthly staff meetings, to put a business continuity exercise in there around, okay, let's say all of our computers and internets are bricked. How long can we operate? Can we operate? What are those things that we need to take care of? It would be good to run one of these exercises in a denied or degraded GPS scenario. If we do get into a deeper warfare, there's a risk that our GPS system could go down temporarily, permanently, or not work well at all. For those of you in the upper Midwest, you'll recall last year when the solar flares came through and how that interrupted some of the precision agriculture abilities that we had. And when you do your monthly meetings, it's always good to think about bringing someone else in there. So bring your vet in there for your herd records, your milk co-op. Believe it or not, law enforcement loves to come out and see these operations. I've been speaking publicly and privately for 10 years, and there is a thirst for information about these types of businesses, because oftentimes our law enforcement friends don't get to come on to a farm and understand what that business looks like. So if something happens, it's good for them to know, where do I drive in? Which building do I go to? What is happening here? Things like that. And it's also, this is, if you really want to inject something, bring your nutritionist in. Your ration software might be locked up behind an IT wall, and now you don't have that either. And just a good bit of advice, and I tell people this all over: shorten your supply chains wherever possible for you, for your communities. Try to produce and consume more locally, and that will make us more resilient as a country. What you think, Clay? Any feedback there?
We're getting questions, but I think I'm going to save until the end because I think it's going to tie together.
Gotcha. Good.
Yeah.
All right. I mentioned to everyone at the beginning that I had a lot of different sectors review my presentation. And one of the things that law enforcement asked was, Andrew, we need to talk a little bit about what it means to be in an environment where AI is governing much of what we see and consume, and how do we process that. So a friend of mine had this great saying: if you have an emotional response to information, you are being manipulated. You need to stop and ask yourself why. And the reason that works is our early brain is something called the limbic system. It's the reptile brain. Doesn't have the capacity for rational thought, language, just feelings and emotions. And at the heart of that limbic system is something called the amygdala. And amygdala is Latin for almond, because I guess if you pull your brain apart, it looks like an almond. I don't want to know this. But I do know, if you were to take a line and draw a straight line between both of your eyes to the back of your head, and one line between your ears, those two places it intersects, because the brain has symmetry, is where the amygdala lie. And the reason why is, if we're an early species and someone throws a rock at us or a tiger leaps at us, we don't want to rationalize and think, okay, what should I do next? We want to move. And so it's sort of a base operating system that human beings have. So there was a time back after World War II where Stalin came to rule in the Soviet Union. And one of the things he wanted to understand is, what is the minimal amount of effort it takes to brainwash a human being, basically. And after, experimenting on hundreds of thousands of human beings, what he found is pretty simple. If a human being is subjected to 2 months of outrage, the amygdala begins excreting, I don't know if you knew this chemical, but it begins excreting a chemical that inhibits the ability to go to the neocortex. So when you have an emotional response and you say why, that leaves the reptilian brain and goes to the neocortex. And now you can rationalize what that is and understand who benefits from me feeling this way, blah blah blah. But if you've had those too much outrage, that chemical secretion inhibits the ability for the limbic system to communicate with the neocortex, and those beliefs then become more and more embedded emotionally. With AI out there, though, it's again, I'm very, very skeptical of anything I see, the videos I see right now. And think about from a practical standpoint for our audience out there. If you get an email or a text that says your bank account's been compromised, click here to reset, and there's a sense of urgency. Number one, because it scares you, but number two, let's say that text keeps on coming in, then a phone call comes in, then an email comes in. You're more likely to act upon that without rationally thinking about that. You might get an email that says your Amazon purchase of $825 is ready to ship. Click here to see your order. Well, I didn't order anything. Get rich fast, fear of missing out, and then most of all, and I kind of this one pains me a little bit to say because I did come from a sales background. Helpfulness. A lot of times malcontents will reach out to marketing and sales teams just to gather information, and because they're wired to be helpful, oftentimes that information is given. How are we looking, Clay?
We're getting more questions, but I'm going to save them.
All right.
Yes.
Well, good. So I did, for the sake of time, remove one slide that I typically have between that one and this one. But keep in mind that not only is AI manipulating us in terms of what we're seeing, it's also building networks of synthetic human beings out there, synthetic companies. And these are becoming more and more sophisticated, and they will be indistinguishable in a digital world from anything that you see, hear, read, or process. So going forward, just be skeptical. If you get an email, a text, a video, a phone call, even if it's a voice of someone you know, love, and trust, just be a little bit skeptical. Always keep that spidey sense up. Many of these AI-enabled attacks have been thwarted by someone's spidey sense tingling just a little bit. Something just doesn't feel quite right. So keep that in the back of your minds as well. All right, so practical things. I told you, it's giving you hope at the end of this presentation. Here is your hope. So every day when you wake up or when you go to bed at night, it doesn't matter, but every day you need to restart your phone. And folks like, well, why? Well, a couple reasons. We talked about Salt Typhoon before, the Chinese malware that sits in most devices. The reason it's so successful, it does something called living off the land. Instead of embedding code into your phone deeply, it sits in this temporary memory. And many of the scans, at least up until recently, never looked at temporary memory as a place where the malicious code would sit. So until your phone is restarted, that will sit there and operate. Another thing too, our adversaries are very good at stealing things, and they love to steal source code. And whether that source code powers your phone, powers your computer, they will take that and find flaws or bugs in it, and those are called zero-day exploits. They've never been seen before, so this is a 0 day. It's just happening today. And when Verizon or Google or Microsoft recognizes that this is being exploited, they'll put a patch out there. But sometimes that patch won't be applied to your device until it goes through your automatic patch update, whenever that is, 12 hours, 24 hours, whatever that is. By restarting your phone, you automatically put that patch and update in there. Last year, I was part of a panel discussion at the Animal Ag Alliance, and one of the folks on the stage with me looked at the audience and she said, raise your hand if you use the same password on more than 2 websites. And it was conservatively 40 hands in the air. So the reason you don't want to do that, it's not maybe a thief can hack your password, maybe not. That's not the goal. What these malcontents will do is they break into a website and they pull out all the usernames and passwords. Then they program their AI agents to go to every website on the planet, plug that email address and password combination into every website out there, find all the open doors and go that way. If you use different passwords for different websites, you will be at least a little bit safer from that. Um, a few years ago spoke to a pork producer in the South, and he had an intrusion that came in through their home router, which was also his business router. It was a ransomware attack, and then somehow from the business it went to his restaurants. So he paid the ransom, and then of course 6 months later there was another attack, and all that happened because there was a shared router. So if you've got internet, your home, your business, and all that tied together, I strongly recommend you get separate pieces for that. And I can't recommend any particular devices, but if you've got somebody, whether in your family or in your neighborhood or someone you hire that has that aptitude, I would strongly recommend them to advise you on that. Another thing too, and I love doing tabletop exercises, or what we call TTXs. These are great ways not only to build teamwork, but build muscle memory. In the event that the worst day does happen, is there's not a sense of panic. Everyone knows their roles, responsibilities. There could be an SOP created. There could be backup plans right there. But a lot of this stuff, even if you think you know everything, trust me, I don't think I know I had not ever been part of a TTX where something wasn't discovered that no one had thought of. And one of the things too, as I talk to some producers out there, they've said, Andrew, make sure you let people know that part of that TTX should be know where all your employees are so they're safe. That should be part of the SOP of any kind of business continuity. It could be an explosion, it could be a tornado, it could be a cyber attack, whatever that scenario that you run. And someone else said, make sure you order pizza. So be nice, and because it could be a long day there too. So when we talk about social engineering and all that, sometimes it's not necessarily to influence the human, it's to learn information about the organization. What do the workflows look like? Who's in charge of receiving? Who's in charge of billing? Who are the vendors and the suppliers that you engage with? Who answers the phone? What's their voice sound like? Is there any video out there? And again, it's not humans doing that. These are AI agents or bots that are doing all this work for them. And even though we're sort of in the heyday, early days of AI, you can see how quickly the pencil point's getting sharpened, and the ability to distinguish between an AI generated whatever and your boss telling you to change the bank routing number is going to be very difficult. Law enforcement has let us know that fake invoices are very hot right now. So this goes back to that spidey sense. Let your payables folks, your billables folks know that this is something that is of high concern, high focus, and everything should be treated with skepticism. In the old days, and I think even now, sometimes real estate agents will give mortgage details on a piece of paper and tell them not to email that anywhere. For those of you who have never been the subject of a ransomware attack, two things that the criminals go for. Number one is they want to find out where your backups are, and they disable those. And number two, they look for your insurance documents. The reason they do that is because sometimes you have cyber insurance, and sometimes that cyber insurance will pay ransom. So they'll go in there and hope they find that. And if they do, now they know how much your insurance company is willing to pay on your behalf to unlock your system. And they'll contact you and it won't be some strong armed gruff person. It'll be the customer service representative will contact you and say, please put us in touch with your insurance agency, and the insurance agency will get on the phone with them, and they'll negotiate, and they'll talk them down from 3 Bitcoins to 2.5 or whatever that number is, and the check will be paid. So if you want to break that chain, take your insurance documents off your computer, off your hard drives, off your network, and keep them on a USB stick, but make sure there's air between those documents and your computer so that the criminals can't get in there and pull them out and begin those negotiations. I remember a day, Clay, when I had a 4-digit password, and I remember getting a little bit upset when Hotmail told me I had to make a longer password. It's similar today. If you don't have multi-factor authentication, whether that's a text, whether that's an email, whether it's a passkey, if you don't have some other way to verify that is you requesting to get into your bank account or into some sensitive area where you keep your crown jewels, shame on you. This is an area that has been widely known to be of high vulnerability. There are certainly instances and exceptions of people, malcontents cracking through that, but make it hard. The harder a target you are, they're going to move on to find something a little bit easier. And if you have an MFA, it's going to give you some kind of alert that someone is trying to break into your account. Back to another thing too, VPNs. When I was out in Las Vegas, I was really surprised at how many people were using public Wi-Fi without protecting themselves. And it used to be a really nice convenience back in the day, but currently, you still, I highly recommend you have a VPN. I know there's two sides to that coin, but right now it seems to be that tendencies and advice from others is to put that on, especially when you're traveling, in an airport or hotel or something like that. And I know, and again, I've been part of social media since MySpace and maybe even a little bit before that. We love to talk about who we are and promote ourselves. I mean, we're in a TikTok, Instagram world these days, but also understand that AI agents are actively scraping every bit of public information about you, your organization, your family, and it's being archived, whether it's useful today or not. So all those videos, all those pictures, anything you don't want to be part of an AI large language model, I would make it private at this point in time. Couple last things here. Never scan a QR code if you're in a restaurant and someone brings you a menu and has a QR code on it, and the menu comes up and it looks great and you order all the stuff you want. What you don't maybe know is that you might also have a keystroke monitor or some other malware inserted into your device. I never scan QR codes unless I'm 1,000% certain of the person who is giving it to me and the place it's supposed to go. I know some folks that might be hyperbole, but I'd rather be safe than sorry. So be very, very cautious and wary of QR codes. And I apologize to Balchem if you guys use QR codes in your materials, because that might not be the best thing. And the last thing, well, I guess one last thing too, Clay, you'll appreciate this. Going back to making sure that the systems still work. If you do have old machinery that's still functional, but you're upgrading it, keep that around. You just never know when that might come in handy. But Clay, I'll end it here because I'm sure there's going to be a question or two. If you guys need to reach us, ISAC.bio, IC3.gov is a government clearinghouse. So any internet crime you report there, you can report it anonymously, but they use that for trend analysis to see things popping up. And the Animal Ag Alliance, I think they're phenomenal in tracking a lot of what the activists are doing right now.
Thank you, Andrew. That was great. We do have a lot of questions coming in. Before we get started with the Q&A portion, we'd like to share a brief video, and then we'll get right back to answer the questions submitted during today's presentation.
The economics of feeding ReaShure precision-release choline. ReaShure is fed during the transition period, and because it's fed for such a short period of time, it costs just $15 per cow, and yet the benefits will continue to generate income throughout the year. Cows fed ReaShure produce 5 pounds more colostrum, which pays for your ReaShure investment on the very first day of lactation. Cows fed ReaShure also produce 5 pounds more milk per day, every day. That means after the first day, every day is payday. Invest in ReaShure during the transition period and recoup your investment on the very first day of lactation. After that, you got it, payday.
All right, welcome back. So as a reminder, you can still submit questions to the Q&A tab at the top of your screen. So Andrew, the first question is, you mentioned restarting your phone every day. What about your computer?
Yeah. Same principle applies.
Okay, our next question, this one's coming in from Thomas. What is a VPN?
Virtual private network. And Microsoft, it depends on if you have an Apple, a Mac, or a PC. Microsoft has something called Firewall Defender already built into it. I have a secondary firewall on top of that. And that secondary firewall, it's not cheap. It's probably more than I want to pay every month, but I pay it anyway. And that includes a VPN with it as well. But there's a lot of them out there. Some of them, again, that's why, I was kind of on the teeter-totter about answering that in that way. Some of them are nefarious. You got to have a reputable VPN. You got to do some homework there.
Okay, so the next question is from Joel. Did you suggest that transmission of avian influenza to dairy cattle was attributable to agri-terrorism?
No, but what our adversaries will do is it will take an issue and they'll either amplify it or get on top of it or utilize it in some way to further their means. I would, because of the wonderful nutrition of milk and the different types of pathogens that exist in it pre-pasteurization, I would keep that in your back of your mind.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Mark. What is your advice on securing herd computers and backups?
Honestly, unless you're an IT expert, I would push that back on who you bought them from. Say, what is your advice? How do we protect those? And I'm going to make a note of it here too, just to ensure that I give you guys that checklist. Because that's going to be critical. It's about 15, 20 questions you can ask. And these are questions that should be answered.
Okay. Our next question is from Ryan. What's the best way to conveniently manage my 50 unique passwords? Is it Google Edge? Is Google Edge autofill safe?
I will answer this way. I use Google Chrome. I use all Google tools. Google is a partner of the BioISAC. They have an organization called Mandiant, which is one of the premier cyber organizations we have here in the United States. I can't really endorse one product over another. There are conventions for password creation and naming. Again, sometimes it's facial recognition, sometimes it's a thumbprint, sometimes it's a passkey. So that's a hard question to answer, but it's one that you do need to pay attention to.
Okay, our next question's from Jorge. How are you thinking about scalable training so dairy companies can equip their teams to spot early signs of gray zone or cyber-enabled attacks and to respond effectively when an incident occurs?
Fantastic question. I love to hear that. Like I said, I've been doing this for 10 years and all of agriculture, and I am barely scratching the surface and getting this message out there. So, thank you, Balchem, for giving me this point and this pedestal to stand on to talk about this. So Jorge, I would say reach out to us, follow us on the website, follow me on LinkedIn, or follow the BioISAC on LinkedIn. We try to put good information out there. We do. We are constantly doing regional events. I have one coming up in New Mexico, April 1st. So if you know any producers in West Texas or New Mexico, we'd love to have you join us for that. That is a private presentation. It'll be a little bit higher level, a little bit deeper than what I gave today. But you know, and Clay, if you want to share anyone's information about that, I can certainly ensure that they're invited to the ones when it's appropriate.
Okay, thank you. Our next question comes in from Carolyn. With regard to cybercrime, you mentioned animal activists in other countries like China. What about the influence of tech billionaires on the government? Could that pose threats too? And yes, this question is coming from Europe.
You know, I don't want to upset any of our friends out there. Let me put it this way first. Mark Zuckerberg, the owner of Facebook, we'll use him as an example. From what I've read, he has a private island in Hawaii where he is raising Angus cattle, I believe, and with under nut trees. Whether that's the best use of that, I don't know. In terms of any kind of infiltration of our ag system by billionaires for nefarious intents, I don't necessarily see that. I don't see them. And if they are, it's a decimal point fraction of the threat posed by our foreign adversaries.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Mariana. As farms adopt new technologies like AI and automation, how are security risks being managed to make sure they don't create new cyber vulnerabilities?
I don't want to overgeneralize and say they're not, because I'm sure there are some out there that have taken this into account. But I would say that would be the exception rather than the rule. I think this is something that needs to be addressed by both industry, industry and the consumer of whatever good or product that is. It's if you think about the internet when it first started, it was built for open information interoperability. I mean, if you think about the pipes under an aging city, the sewer pipes, it's crumbling, and we've stacked all this stuff on top of it. And so at the very base of it, there's an inherent flaw for security purposes. In the early days, there were no passwords. You can go anywhere, do anything. But now we have all this stuff on here, and everyone still thinks about interoperability. How do we drill down in there and move information around? All I ask is if you're creating a computer program, before you put one line of code on the page, or before you put one screw in a robot, think about, how am I going to defend this? How can I be secure? You know, and when I tell that to entrepreneurs that are out there that are in those spaces, they're like, oh, that's great. Yeah, we didn't think about that. You know, it's just a matter of putting that on the list. So I love that question, and I wish I had a better answer for you, but it's a scary world out there.
Okay, our next question is from Ron. How can I prevent hiring an activist sleeper cell to work on my farm?
Good question. So I would push you to the Animal Ag Alliance. They have got, actually, you know what? I think I have a link here that would answer that question. I do. So I'm going to drop a link in here about that thread, because it is interesting. And if this is a topic of interest to your listeners, I will be speaking in hang on a second, early May in Kansas City at the Animal Ag Alliance, along with the punk rock farmer and Kristen King, about the intersection between animal activist and cyber risk.
Okay, thank you. Okay, our next question is from Rianne. What's your recommended approach to secure remote access, which is increasingly common as farmers work with remote consultants and tech service?
Yeah, that's part of that checklist is understanding who has access, when do they have access, can I control this access? It is, you know, we're paying a price for convenience, you know, and again, I'm only focusing on the dark side of the coin. You know, there is a positive side here too, obviously, and there's a convenience side, an efficiency side, safety side. There's a lot of good things that come from that. but I'm paid to think about the dark side of things too, and how do we mitigate against that? And if it happens, how do you respond? And that's like going back to who's liable. Let's say that an employee leaves that company, that remote access account is not disabled. Someone gets into that company. If it's an IT firm. A while back, there was some chatter about maybe some of these IT firms were hiring North Korean remote workers and didn't know it because those were the best workers. What does that look like? So that's a good question too. And those are ones I would throw right back to the vendor and tell me, give me a list of why I'm protected here. What have you done to make sure that my data, my access is locked down?
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Robin. What are your top 5 ways to protect my farm's cyber infrastructure?
Number one, you should have an inventory of every device on your farm that plugs into your internet. And it could be your cellular internet, it could be your Wi-Fi, it could be a hardwire. Number two, make sure that anything that's critical has a password protection on it, and know what that password is, know when the last time it was changed. There are tools out there that are free that you can use today that will scan the entire internet for open connections. And if you find it and you find out what kind of tool and piece of machinery is that's connected to it, you can go on the internet and find the PDF of the owner's manual, and you go read through there and find what the default password is. That's you, or you can assign an AI agent to do that all over the globe instantly. And trust me, there are many, many open windows and doors. And I think many of our producers and processors might not even realize the amount that are out there. That's number one. The others, I would push you back to the slide of preventing that worst day. They're using different routers. You want to make sure that you've done your own employee hygiene management. So as people leave, there's new passwords, shared passwords amongst employees. That's always a no-no. If there's just one password for one piece of equipment. Little things like that. I mean, we could get pretty granular on that too, but Clay, I think this is a good opportunity to send that checklist over.
Yeah. Okay, our next question is from Riley. What elements of the dairy industry or agriculture more broadly seem to be favored targets for cyber attacks?
Well, with cyber attacks, there's a couple things. There's what we call left of boom, and right of boom, and that came from the military with improvised explosive devices. Left of boom is before the explosion happens, the boom explosion, and then right of boom is the aftermath. I have always focused on the right of boom side of things after the attack has occurred. So our adversaries now, and even more so from what I've read recently, aren't executing attacks. They're just lying in waiting until the right opportunity. So whether you hear, and typically when you hear about one, there are 9 or 10 others in that sector that happen simultaneously, because a lot of times I went back to the attribution side, our adversaries will hit one entire sector with one tool at once within a certain time period. And because information sharing across the agriculture sector is so broken and siloed, and it's not intentional, it's just everyone has their own little space there, that information is not shared. And so it's hard to get ahead of it, so we're always reacting to that. So to that question, it's hard to say, because it's like PFAS, in my opinion. I think the harder you look, the more you're going to find it. And I would encourage every agriculture processor and producer to take a hard look at their systems to see if something's in there.
Okay, thank you. Our next question is from Skylar. How did you become aware of the cybersecurity threats to the dairy industry?
We monitor things worldwide. Again, just through news sources, open source, and if we see a concentration of things happening in a certain country, in a certain sector, we know that our adversaries will use those sometimes as sandboxes to test their cyber warriors and weapons out prior to deploying them on us. And in dairy, we saw some very interesting attacks. And we also, I'm a research analyst, so we poked and prodded as far as we could, ethically and legally, and saw a lot of open windows and doors. And part of being a future threat modeler is seeing these lines that are moving towards a convergence point. And we saw that about 18 months ago in dairy. So, but dairy is just one sector. I speak to grains, I speak to all animal protein, indoor ag. It's just, I'm one person. So getting out there and being able to spread the message again. Thank you, Balchem, for allowing me to bring this to the sector's attention.
Okay, our next question comes in from Carrie. What would you say to farmers and others who may be wary of building relationships with law enforcement?
That's a fantastic question. And back, boy, I want to say under Trump 1, that was one of the things that we first dealt with, because my first initial partner was the FBI. And I asked them, what is the highest and greatest use of my ability to get the messaging out there? And they said, focus on write a boom. When we get called, it's after the thing has happened. And there's a lot of people upset. There's board members, there's legal, there's risk management, there's community. So I have really focused my last 10 years mainly on write a boom, preparing for that thing, understanding who communicates with the press and who communicates to the command center. And I told the FBI, I said, listen, I'm coming from the ag community, and there's a lot of reluctance for folks to allow you to come and talk to them. And they said, well, let people know, listen, we're there to catch the criminals. And they want to be very clear about that. If someone has done a criminal act against you, whether it's a trespass, whether it's a cyber crime, their job is to catch that criminal. They're not there on a fishing expedition. They're there to get in and out as quickly as possible, and they will only access what you allow them to access. They only go where you allow them to go. There are some folks that feel that because of different the protests they may have participated in, that might make them or taint them in a certain way, and that's not true. The FBI very strongly respects First Amendment rights. What the FBI will not do, however, is fix your computers. I've had several folks I've interacted with that were very upset that the FBI just came in, got log files, and left, because that's their job. They're going to catch a criminal. Their job is not to fix your computers or help you out with insurance or stuff like that. The more you prepare for that event, the better off you'll be. And you don't necessarily have to invite them onto your farm. I would say maybe at a farm bureau or farmers union, whatever association, organization you belong to, come to one of our events. They'll be there. They're accessible. Typically the law enforcement folks and intelligence folks we get have grown up either on a farm or in a rural community and really viscerally understand how critical this is. And I can't tell you how happy I am to have partners like that within our government that really understand agriculture.
Yeah, thank you. To wrap things up here, how can we learn more?
That's a great question. I'm assuming Balchem will send a follow-up email to everyone out there, and perhaps when this is posted, I can have some links below there for more information. That final slide that I showed, I think those are 3 really good places. The Animal Ag Alliance has been just a really strong ally for many, many years, and I recommend very highly following them. If you're a young producer or just getting into this, or a student, they have something called the Ag Allies, and they'll walk you through quite a few things, not only the understanding of all the different agriculture sectors that are out there, but how to respond if someone cyberbullies you or pushes you around a little bit. It's just a phenomenal organization, and I do endorse them. And also the BioISAC, obviously, our organization. We try to share as much as we can share, because sometimes, as you can probably imagine, being behind the curtain, you can only come out on stage and say a few words at a time. But thank you, Clay, and again, thank you, Balchem.